Hi, Simone. Thank you for joining Precoro for today's interview. Could you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Simone. I'm working now in finance since 15 years. I started back in the days in banking and consulting and switched then over 10 years ago to the startup scale-up side and worked for several, I would say, high-growth companies like Soundcloud, HelloFresh, here, and my last position was at Gorillas. I set everywhere up finance teams from scratch, implemented ERP systems and processes. I'm a high believer in automation. Next to that, I founded with two other CFOs 4 years ago the Finance Leaders League. It's a finance network where finance leaders could share knowledge. And thanks for the invitation.
It's our pleasure. Simone, how would you describe the typical purchasing process in high-growth companies like Gorillas?
What I experienced is that when you're working in high-growth companies, that it's usually pretty messy, the whole purchasing process, because you don't have systems and processes from the beginning. So at some point, it's becoming more and more important that you are implementing processes and systems, making sure that people are staying in the budgets, behaving cost-conscious, and that you have control of the spending volume and your cash burn.
And what about the typical approval workflow?
Usually the process looks like that when you want to onboard a new supplier, for example, you first for sure have to do legal checks like data security, etc., that they are fulfilling the company requirements. And then it goes to the finance team, that the controlling team says yes or no, it's in budget. And then it goes back to the department that they can go ahead or not go ahead with the purchase.
High-growth companies have a lot of indirect spending. What is your method for staying in budget?
I think it makes sense that you are implementing thresholds for using a PO system, or when it's a hard requirement that you have to raise a PO. From my experience, it makes sense for amounts above 1K, so that you are able to really catch the material amounts instead of the smaller stuff, which is not material for the cost behavior. And then for sure it depends on the company size, these thresholds. I made always good experience at Tia and Gorillas with 1,000 euros.
And what's the typical monthly invoice volume for a high-growth company?
For sure that is also depending on the company size. We at Gorillas at the beginning had a lot of invoices, I would say 2 to 3K in the indirect area. After we implemented then processes and also said, hey, you always have to take the same supplier instead of onboarding new ones, for sure we got it a bit down, but we still had above 1K every month.
Which departments are the biggest spenders in your experience?
There it depends a bit on the business model, but for us it was marketing, definitely, biggest spender. Then tech, so all the tools, AWS and co, and then finance and legal, and then office, also the rents if you have.
Simone, from your experience with scale-ups and fast-growing companies, what were the main pain points in the purchasing process?
So it was super messy, as I said at the beginning, so it was very hard to track the cash burn and stay in the targeted cash burn and really control the spending behavior. I would say it was everywhere a bit like Wild Wild West.
Was spending volume a pain point as well?
For sure, when you are getting more than 1,000 invoices and you don't have a tool or a process in place, it's completely random, and then usually you are getting only visibility 2 or 3 weeks after month-end closing, which is too late. And then you have a lot of spending surprises.
Then, how do you envision the perfect purchasing process for a fast-growing company?
Ideally, you have a tool and automation in place that you can avoid this 1,000 Slack messages and emails. So first you have to do for sure the legal check, and then the rest should be automated so that you have a tool where the budgets are, where you have the approval metric behind, and make sure that finance are checking at least everything, that you can make sure that you are staying in budget.
You mentioned the need for both the tools and processes. What should a good spend management tool help you accomplish?
Definitely stay in budget and into cash targets. Also create transparencies to the teams, that they can see really on real time what they spend when you are putting budgets behind the cost. And for sure it should be easy for the finance team that you can ideally match the POs with the incoming invoices.
Would you require specific integrations?
That is very important. That that you are really choosing tools which ideally have already an integration or API to your ERP. At Thiel and Gorillas we used NetSuite, so we were really only looking for tools who already offered this integration.
And what other features do you think are important when choosing such a tool?
So also there, I think you have to make sure that you are not slowing down your AP, accounts payable department. So you have to make sure that the tool ideally has already OCR functionality, that you are able to do that two-way or three-way matching.
Rolling out a new system can be challenging for a company. Do you have any advice on how to introduce it effectively to end users?
Yeah, I think it's very important that you are really getting the commitment from other teams in the company, otherwise they are not adopting it. You really have to make sure that it's easy to use, that there is a great user experience also for non-finance teams, especially marketing, etc. At my previous company, where we had a relatively old school ERP and nobody was willing to use it because it was so complicated. So make sure that it's easy to use, ideally with your mobile, and takes not a lot of time.
Can you describe your software selection process and what led you to choose Precoro as a vendor?
So the selection took place in the finance department. So it was a collaboration work between controlling and accounting. So I asked them, please come up with ideally 2 or 3 solutions who have this NetSuite integration. Pricing, for sure we had to do legal checks, etc., that it's working from a data perspective. But the decision was made within finance. And as I said before, we tested, before we made the decision, also the adoption willingness from core user teams.
Was it easy to implement and adopt Precoro?
We were able to implement it relatively quickly. I think from the decision to the first start, it took us like 6 weeks. But then you have to train the people. So how we did it, we defined 2 people from each department, that you really can train them and make them accountable. And then same for the accounting department, for sure you have to train them. And then you can't expect that it's working from day one, that you have a matching rate, so purchase order and invoices from 100%. What we saw at Gorillas, it took us 6 months to get to an adoption rate of 90%, which is a super good result, I think.
What was important to get the team on board with using the new software?
I made the experience, it's very helpful to make that test before you're making the decision for a tool. I always like the example marketing, because if you don't get their buy-in, nobody's using it, is my experience. If you have their buy-in, it's very easy to get the commitment from the rest of the company.
What helped you achieve the high match rate?
It took us 6 months to get to this 90%, but we were also very strict already after 2-3 months where we said no PO, no pay. And you, for sure, your finance team, your business partner, finance team has to do a good job. To really train the teams, we offered open hours when people were not sure how to deal with it, but I think it worked really well.
Can you elaborate on the no PO, no pay rule?
So we were really strict and said it's not our problem anymore. So if you're ordering stuff without a pre-approval, you have to deal with the supplier, because otherwise you are never getting it under control if you are not strict. Because then people know how it is.
Are you satisfied with the process you've been able to build in Precoro?
Yes, so we were able to put budgets behind the departments. So for them it was also great to see how much they spent already in the months, how much budget they have left. So departments also were able to get a real-time overview instead of getting it very late after month-end closing. And for sure it was great for finance to control the cash burn and the spending in general. That there were no surprises coming when the month was closed.
What would you like to see improved in Precoro?
Ideally there should be also legal integration, because that we had to do still manually. So if there's a supplier onboarding and you have to check, as I said, the data security aspects or also the company requirements, that is still missing and manual, because that's always the first step. When you have a new supplier, when you have an existing one, it's not a problem.
Did implementing Precoro improve your day-to-day job?
I think for finance it was a great help. So first, to get finally more control on cash and on budgets and less surprises when we were reviewing the monthly P&Ls. A great advantage for the company was also that they got a lot of cost transparency, because they had a real-time overview what is left in the budget, what we can still raise or which costs we can accrue. So I think it was a help on both sides, not only finance. I think Precoro fulfills everything. The OCR, the API to NetSuite, then the integrated OCR solution, that were all there. And I think why we choose Precoro, it's very user-friendly, has a really nice interface. We were able to put budgets behind teams, departments, to make sure that they are not overspending. Helped also a lot to give them transparency, that each department knew directly what they could spend or what spend they have left. Then it was much easier for controlling/finance to control cost and the upcoming cash burn, also for cash forecasting. And we implemented the no PO, no pay process. Due to the fact that we were able to match incoming invoices with POs,